The Galactic Council had made many mistakes in their 50,000 years of existence, but none quite as catastrophic as underestimating humanity. I remember sitting in that grand chamber, my translator humming softly as I recorded what would become the most infamous session in Council history. The massive crystalline dome above us reflected the light of 3 suns, casting rainbow shadows across the faces of 200 different species representatives. The humans are nothing but primitive savages, Ambassador Crix had declared, his bioluminescent tentacles pulsing with contempt. They'd barely mastered interplanetary travel. Their weapons are crude. Their diplomacy is childish. I propose we proceed with the standard colonization protocol. If only they had taken a closer look at Earth's history. If only they had studied how humans had survived extinction-level events, adapted to every climate from burning deserts to frozen tundra, and developed from stone tools to space flight in a mere 10,000 years. But the Council was too proud, too set in their ways to see what was right in front of them. The invasion began on what humans called a Tuesday. The Council sent their standard intimidation fleet, 5,000 ships strong, each capable of leveling a small continent. They expected Earth to surrender immediately, like countless civilizations before them. Instead, they received a response that would forever change the galaxy's power structure. "We've been watching your ships approaching for the past 6 months," the human representative had transmitted, their voice eerily calm. "Thank you for giving us time to prepare. And thank you especially for broadcasting all your tactical communications in standard galactic common. Our AI systems found your encryption. Amusing. What happened next still haunts my dreams. The human defense platforms, previously invisible to our sensors, activated simultaneously. But these weren't the primitive missile systems the Council expected. Humanity had reverse-engineered every piece of alien technology they'd salvaged from crashed scout ships over the past century. And they'd improved upon them in ways that should have been impossible. The Council's mighty armada found itself trapped in a web of artificial gravity wells, their shields useless against weapons that phased through them like they didn't exist. The humans hadn't just prepared for battle, they'd prepared for total victory. But it was what came after that truly shocked the Galactic Council. Instead of demanding revenge or reparations, Earth's representatives requested a seat at the Council table. They came armed not with weapons, but with technological innovations that could benefit all species. They offered solutions to problems that had plagued the galaxy for millennia. As I sit here now, watching the human delegation take their seats for the first time, I can't help but wonder, was this their plan all along? To teach the Council a lesson in humility while simultaneously proving their worth as equals. The other representatives whisper among themselves, a mix of fear and respect in their voices. They're beginning to understand what I realized during that first battle. Humanity's greatest weapon isn't their technology or their military might. It's their ability to turn enemies into allies, to forge strength from adversity, and to face the unknown not with fear, but with determination and adaptability. The galaxy would never be the same after Earth's vicious revenge, but perhaps that's exactly what the Galactic Council needed. A reminder that true civilization isn't measured by age or technology, but by wisdom and the capacity for growth. The real question now is, what will humanity do with their newfound power in the Council? And more importantly, what other surprises do they have waiting in case anyone makes the mistake of underestimating them again? The Council chambers grew unusually quiet as the human delegation settled into their newly assigned seats. Their section stood out, not because of any elaborate decorations or imposing architecture, but because of its stark functionality. While other species displayed their status through crystalline ornaments or biological luminescence, the humans had installed simple holographic interfaces and what appeared to be standard-issue comfort seating. This practical approach made many representatives uncomfortable. It reminded them too much of humanity's efficiency during the failed invasion. I noticed something else that day, something that made my recording appendages twitch with anticipation. The humans had brought with them a small, unassuming device that they'd placed at the center of their desk. Most species ignored it, but I'd spent enough time studying Earth's history to recognize a teapot, a simple vessel for preparing heated leaf water. This seemingly innocent object spoke volumes about their intentions. They weren't just here for political posturing. They planned to stay for long discussions. Before we proceed with today's agenda, the human representative announced, her voice carrying naturally through the chamber without technological amplification, we would like to address the elephant in the room. Several species translation devices struggled with this idiom, creating a wave of confused murmurs. Many of you fear that Earth seeks dominion over the Council. Let us be clear. We don't want your territories, your resources, or your submission. What we want is far more valuable: change. The Arxian representative, their crystalline form shimmering with anxiety, spoke up. Change? You've already forced enough change upon us. Our military algorithms are worthless against your defenses. Our encryption protocols, they trailed off, their crystal facets dimming with embarrassment. Exactly, another human delegate responded, his weathered face bearing the hint of a smile. Your military algorithms haven't been updated in 3,000 years. Your encryption protocols are based on mathematical principles that were outdated before humans discovered fire. The galaxy has grown stagnant, comfortable in its power, while countless younger species are denied the chance to contribute their unique perspectives. I zoomed my recording lens in on the Council Supreme, noting how their usually impassive features showed signs of distress. The humans were saying out loud what many had only dared whisper in private chambers. The Galactic Council had become a preservative force rather than a progressive one. We bring you a proposal, the first human representative continued, activating a holographic display that filled the chamber. Project Renaissance, a complete restructuring of how the Council approaches technological development, species integration, and galactic governance. The display showed a new form of Council architecture, one where younger species would have direct paths to representation, where technological advancement would be encouraged rather than controlled, and where diversity of thought would be valued over tradition. It was beautiful, logical, and absolutely terrifying to the established order. As murmurs of protest rose from the older council members, I noticed something peculiar about the human delegates. They weren't just presenting their proposal. They were watching, analyzing, taking careful note of who reacted with interest and who with fear. My upper appendages trembled as I realized the truth. This wasn't just a proposal. This was a test. The humans were identifying potential allies and obstacles, mapping out the complex web of galactic politics with the same precision they had used to dismantle our invasion fleet. The teapot on their desk began to whistle, a sound that cut through the growing chaos of the chamber like a blade. With deliberate calmness, one of the human delegates poured the steaming liquid into small cups. The message was clear. They were prepared for a long debate, and they had planned for every possible outcome. As I watched them offer tea to their nearest neighbors, I couldn't help but wonder, what would happen to those who failed their test? What other contingency plans had humanity prepared? The tension in the council chamber reached a breaking point 3 hours into the debate. I watched through my recording lenses as centuries of carefully maintained political alliances began to crack. The human delegation's Project Renaissance wasn't just a proposal. It was a mirror forcing every species to confront their own complacency. You cannot seriously be considering this madness. Ambassador Crix bellowed, his tentacles now a dangerous shade of deep purple. These humans survived one battle through trickery and deception, and now they presume to restructure our entire civilization. He turned to address the other council members, his voice trembling with barely contained rage. Need I remind everyone that less than a standard cycle ago, they were still burning fossil fuels? The human delegates remained perfectly still during his outburst, their calm demeanor a stark contrast to the chaos unfolding around them. The only movement from their section was the steady rising of steam from their teacups. I adjusted my sensors, noting how their heart rates remained steady, their breathing controlled. They had expected this reaction. Perhaps the eldest human delegate spoke, her silver hair catching the light of the 3 suns. Ambassador Crix would like to explain why the Council's current system allowed a civilization burning fossil fuels to defeat their most advanced fleet. The chamber fell silent. Or better yet, why none of your sensor systems detected the quantum communication network we built throughout your supposed secure territories. That revelation sent shockwaves through the assembly. Quantum communication networks were theoretical. Even the most advanced council species had failed to create a stable one. Yet here were the humans, casually announcing they'd built an entire network right under the council's collective noses. The Archean representative's crystalline form began to resonate with a frequency I'd never recorded before. "How long?" they asked, their translation device struggling to convey their emotion. "How long have you been watching us?" "Long enough," another human delegate replied, standing to activate a new holographic display. The image showed hundreds of points of light scattered throughout council space, listening posts, observation stations, and data collection nodes, all perfectly concealed using technology that shouldn't have existed. Long enough to know that 3 member species have been secretly developing banned weapons. Long enough to document 7 instances of illegal genetic manipulation of pre-spaceflight civilizations. Long enough to intercept transmissions about the real reason the Proxima Coalition was denied council membership. The Supreme Council members' color drained from their facial membranes. The humans hadn't just built a defense network. They'd created the most comprehensive intelligence gathering system in known space. And they'd done it all while the council thought they were nothing more than primitive savages trying to reach their nearest planetary neighbor. "This isn't a negotiation," the first human delegate said softly, but her words carried to every corner of the chamber. "This is a courtesy notice. Project Renaissance begins tomorrow, with or without the council's approval. We've already identified and contacted 42 species who support reform. We've documented enough evidence of council corruption to justify complete restructuring under galactic law, your own laws, I might add." The chamber erupted into chaos. Species that had been allies for millennia turned on each other, accusations and threats filling the air. Through it all, the human delegation sat quietly, watching. Their teapot was empty now, but I noticed one of them reaching for a sealed container in their briefing materials. Even now, they were preparing for another round. As I recorded these historic moments, my neural processors finally pieced together the humans' true strategy. The failed invasion hadn't been their moment of triumph. It had merely been the key that unlocked the door. Everything since then had been building to this moment, this carefully orchestrated revelation that would either transform the council through cooperation or tear it apart through its own corruption. The real question now wasn't whether Project Renaissance would succeed. It was whether the council would survive the process at all. And judging by the calculating looks on the human delegates' faces, they had already planned for both outcomes. The council chamber's environmental systems struggled to maintain stability as hundreds of agitated species generated excess heat and electromagnetic interference. But just as the chaos reached its peak, every light in the chamber flickered and died. The crystalline dome above, which had reflected the light of 3 suns for millennia, went completely dark. In the sudden silence, a new hologram materialized, not from the human delegation's desk, but from every corner of the chamber simultaneously. Perhaps a new voice echoed through the darkness. "We should show them what else we found during our observations." The hologram coalesced into a stunning 3-dimensional star map of council space, but this one was different from any I'd ever recorded. It showed thousands of points of light that weren't stars or planets. They were ships. Ships that, according to every official record, didn't exist. The human delegate who had been so calm throughout the proceedings finally stood up. "While we were building our intelligence network, we discovered something interesting. Several council members have been maintaining secret fleets, hidden in dimensional pockets throughout supposedly neutral space. Fleets that, by the council's own laws, constitute an act of war." The lights slowly returned, but the hologram remained, now showing detailed scans of vessels that bore the markings of at least 12 different council species, ships that were far more advanced than anything these species had officially declared. The Supreme Council members' facial membranes had now lost all color. "We didn't just defend Earth," another human delegate continued, his voice carrying a weight that seemed to press everyone back into their seats. "We've been defending every emerging civilization in this sector of space. The Proxima Coalition wasn't denied membership because they failed to meet technological requirements. They were denied because they discovered one of these hidden fleets and had to be silenced." The revelation hit the chamber like a physical force. Species that had been allies for centuries now looked at each other with new suspicion. The careful political balance of millennia was unraveling in minutes, but the humans weren't finished. The truly interesting part, the silver-haired delegate said, reaching for what appeared to be another container of tea, is what these fleets were being prepared for. Our quantum network intercepted communications suggesting that certain council members were planning something called the Great Reset, a coordinated operation to eliminate any species that showed too much potential for rapid advancement. I focused my recording apparatus on Ambassador Crix, whose tentacles had gone completely still, a sign of extreme stress in his species. The humans had just revealed that the Council's most sacred principle of protecting developing civilizations had been systematically violated by its own founding members. The first human delegate touched a small control on their desk, and the hologram shifted again, showing a timeline of preparations for this supposed Great Reset. Earth wasn't invaded because we were primitive, she announced. Earth was invaded because your surveillance showed we were advancing too quickly. We weren't the first target, and we wouldn't have been the last. The Chamber's recording systems, which had documented every council session for 50,000 years, suddenly activated on their own, projecting fragments of classified communications that confirmed everything the humans were saying. Someone in the upper tiers of the chamber tried to shut them down, but nothing responded to council override codes anymore. Project Renaissance isn't just about reforming the council, the human delegate said, her voice somehow both gentle and unyielding. It's about preventing genocide. We've already transmitted copies of all this evidence to every spacefaring civilization in the galaxy, along with the quantum encryption protocols needed to verify its authenticity. I watched in stunned silence as several council members tried to access their private communication devices, presumably to contact their hidden fleets. The looks of horror on their faces told me all I needed to know. The humans hadn't just found the ships. They'd done something to them. The silver-haired human delegate smiled for the first time since the session began, and somehow that smile carried more weight than any threat could have. Now, she said, pouring a fresh cup of tea with steady hands, shall we discuss the real terms of reformation? The next few moments in the council chamber defied everything I thought I knew about galactic politics. The Supreme Council member, their composure finally breaking, rose from their ancient seat of power. What have you done to our emergency fleets? They demanded, their translator barely keeping up with their rapid speech patterns. Nothing irreversible, the human delegate replied, taking another sip of tea. Yet, she nodded to her colleague, who activated one final holographic display. This one showed real-time footage of the hidden fleets, each massive ship now surrounded by what appeared to be microscopic clouds of silver dust. We call them peacekeepers, quantum-linked nanites that can disable or restore any system they touch. Right now, they're just maintaining a gentle hold on your ship's critical systems. Ambassador Crix surged forward, his tentacles writhing with fury. You dare to hold our forces hostage. This is an act off. He fell silent as the human delegate raised her hand. Before you say war, Ambassador, remember that these fleets don't officially exist. How can one wage war over ships that, according to every council record, were never built? Her smile remained pleasant, but her eyes held the weight of absolute certainty. More importantly, how will you explain to your citizens why you built them in the first place? The chamber's atmosphere shifted as the implications sank in. The humans hadn't just outmaneuvered the council militarily or politically. They'd created a situation where any resistance would require admitting to centuries of deception. I watched through my lenses as species after species realized the impossible position they were in. But then came the moment that would truly reshape galactic history. The silver-haired human delegate stood, her movement drawing every eye in the chamber. We're not here to destroy the council, she announced. We're here to save it, from itself. She gestured, and the holograms shifted to show something new, thousands of worlds, each pulsing with potential. These are the civilizations your Great Reset would have eliminated. We've been protecting them, nurturing them, preparing them for what comes next. What comes next? The Archean representative's crystalline form trembled with uncertainty. The convergence, another human delegate replied, standing to join his colleague. Our long-range sensors detected it 3 years ago. Something is coming from the space between galaxies, something that will require every species, every unique perspective, every different approach to technology and survival to face. The chamber erupted in a new kind of chaos as the humans projected their sensor data. The images showed massive disturbances in the intergalactic void, patterns that defied conventional physics. For the first time, I understood why the humans had pushed so hard for reform. They hadn't just been playing politics. They'd been preparing the galaxy for a threat none of us had seen coming. "This is your real choice," the first human delegate said, her voice cutting through the panic. Not whether to accept Project Renaissance, but whether to face what's coming as a divided, stagnant council clinging to power, or as a united galaxy drawing strength from our differences. The Supreme Council members slowly sank back into their seat, their aged features showing something I'd never recorded before: hope. How long do we have? The human delegation shared a look before their leader responded. If our calculations are correct, 5 years, just enough time to implement the reforms, integrate the emerging civilizations, and prepare our combined technology for what awaits us. That's when the final piece of humanity's strategy became clear to my recording sensors. Their revenge against the Council hadn't been about punishment at all. It had been about transformation. They had orchestrated everything, from their seemingly primitive defense of Earth to this very moment, to forge the galaxy into something stronger. The Supreme Council member rose once more, but this time with purpose rather than anger. "I propose an immediate vote on the implementation of Project Renaissance." They paused, their translator working overtime to convey the complexity of their next words. "And I propose that Earth lead the preparation efforts for this. Convergence." The chamber fell silent as the gravity of the moment settled over every species present. But before the vote could begin, the human delegates shared another look that made my recording appendages tingle with anticipation. Something told me they had one more surprise waiting, one final revelation that would ensure the galaxy's course wouldn't just be changed, but transformed forever. The vote was unanimous. The first time in Council history that all species agreed on a major reform. But as the official recording systems logged the historic moment, the human delegation revealed their final masterstroke. The silver-haired delegate stood one last time, holding what appeared to be an ordinary data crystal. "Before we proceed with the implementation of Project Renaissance," she said, her voice carrying a hint of what I now recognized as carefully controlled amusement, "there's one more thing you should know." She inserted the crystal into the Council's central display system, and a new set of images filled the chamber. "We didn't just detect the convergence 3 years ago. We've been watching it for the past 50 years. The images showed detailed scans and analysis of the approaching phenomenon, far more comprehensive than what they'd revealed earlier. But more shocking were the timestamps. Humanity had known about this threat before they'd even launched their first space station. "Those primitive satellites you all ignored," another human delegate added, "they weren't just looking at nearby stars. They were designed to detect quantum disturbances in space-time. We knew something was coming long before we had the technology to face it. That's why we developed everything else. The quantum communication network, the nanet peacekeepers, even our seemingly rapid technological advancement. It was all part of a larger plan." The Supreme Council members' translator crackled as they processed this information. You orchestrated everything, even your own invasion." "Not exactly," the first delegate replied, pouring what would be the final cup of tea for this historic session. "We knew someone would eventually try to stop Earth's progress. The Council's pattern of behavior was clear from our surveillance. We simply prepared accordingly and used the inevitable invasion attempt as a catalyst for the changes we knew the galaxy would need." I zoomed my recording apparatus in on the human delegation as they shared knowing looks. They had played the longest game in galactic history, not for power, not for revenge, but for survival. For everyone's survival. "The convergence isn't just a threat," the silver-haired delegate continued. "It's an opportunity. Our scientists believe it's a remnant of the universe's early formation, a pocket of space-time where the fundamental forces of reality behave differently. Understanding it could advance our collective knowledge by millennia, but facing it will require something the Council lost long ago: the ability to adapt, to think beyond established boundaries, to embrace change rather than fear it. The chamber, which had seen so much chaos and revelation in the past few hours, fell into a contemplative silence. Species that had been enemies for centuries now looked at each other with new understanding. The humans hadn't just prevented a war or exposed corruption, they'd given the galaxy a common purpose. Project Renaissance begins tomorrow, the human delegate announced, standing to conclude the session. But the real work, the real challenge, starts now. We have 5 years to transform the Council from a preservative force into an engine of innovation and cooperation. Every species, from the oldest Council member to the youngest emerging civilization, has something unique to contribute. As the session officially ended and the various representatives began to disperse, I noticed something remarkable. Species that hadn't physically approached each other in generations were now gathering in small groups, already beginning to discuss implementation plans and technological cooperation. The human delegation's table had become a focal point, with representatives from dozens of worlds sharing ideas over cups of that seemingly simple Earth beverage. I finished my recording of this historic day with a final observation. Earth's vicious revenge hadn't been vicious at all. It had been an act of salvation disguised as retribution, a carefully orchestrated wake-up call for a galaxy that had lost its way. And as I watched the human delegates sharing their tea with former enemies and new allies alike, I understood that humanity's greatest weapon had never been their technology or their strategy. It had been their hope, their unflinching belief that the galaxy could be better than it was. They had proven that true strength lies not in maintaining power, but in knowing when and how to share it. The Council would never be the same, and perhaps that had been the point all along.